Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everybody, and welcome to Pangolin, the conservation podcast, the show dedicated to exploring and amplifying the world's underappreciated conservation stories. The stories that inspire me, and I hope will inspire you too. I'm your host, Jack Baker, and today I am here with a very special episode all about pangolins, our favourite, of course. This episode is produced in collaboration with the David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation, and I'm so excited because they are fantastic and they have made a wonderful episode possible. To celebrate our favourite scaly mammal, they have helped me get two amazing people. I'm joined by Beryl Makori from the Pangolin Project. You may know her as the Batwoman of Africa, but she is now working in the world of pangolins, and it's so exciting to talk to her. And I'm also joined by Wildlife Artist of the Year, Karen Laurence-Rowe. And it's so great because we're going to chat all about the conservation of pangolins, the power of wildlife art, the charm of pangolins, the fact that there are giant pangolins in Kenya, which just blows my mind and is amazing, and so many more amazing things. And I'm so excited for you to hear it. Because on top of all that, we also get to talk about bats. As I may have hinted at before, we get to chat about whales and chameleons and how we can all make a difference no matter where we are in the world. And yeah, it's just a fantastic time. Now, I should also say that if you are feeling particularly generous and you're listening to this the week it comes out, so the week of the 27th of November 2023, then right now you can donate to the David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation's Big Give campaign. It's entitled Against All Odds, The Scale of Extinction, and all of the money raised through this campaign will go to support fantastic conservation work of the pangolin, our absolute favourites. Not only that, but if you donate through the Big Give website, what makes this even better is that all of the money that you donate will be matched. So double the love for the pangolins at the same cost to you. So really go out there and do it, because when else are you going to have the opportunity to have free money donated to pangolins? Go. It's amazing, wonderful, fantastic. You have until December 5th to donate. And so if you have any spare change at all, and are feeling generous and are inspired by the two amazing guests or any of the other work that you've heard about because of this podcast to do with pangolins, then go and really, now is the time to give. So thank you so much. And I would be so grateful if you did. Because David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation has been so fantastic to work with. They've helped bring amazing people onto the show for this episode, and I'm so grateful for all of their support. And so yes, the link to the Big Give campaign, Against All Odds, The Scale of Extinction, will be in the description of this episode. Go if you have the time and the money, and I'd be very happy. But yes, anyway, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for joining us today. I will now let the episode play. Of course, subscribe, leave us a nice review, do all those fun things. But most of all, please enjoy today's conversation with the wonderful Beryl Makori and Karen Laurence-Rowe. And without further ado, let's get started. And welcome back to the show. Today I am joined by Karen Laurence-Rowe and Beryl Makori, who both work with the David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation in very different ways. We're here to talk a little bit about their work, how they do it, the pangolin, of course, every time it comes up, and yes, some of the things that their work has in common, and a lot of the ways that it's very different. And so I'm so excited to have you both here. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. No, it's my absolute pleasure. And I always think it's interesting when we have two guests with such different specialities, but all kind of looking at the same kind of wanting the same thing ultimately. And I'm really excited to see kind of, how your work is similar, how it's very different, and kind of hopefully we'll, just have a nice, really interesting chat about art and pangolins, and maybe I might ask you, Beryl, about bats as well, because when I saw that on your CV, I had to know a little bit more. But to get us started, I always give a little introduction, but of course you two know yourselves far better than I know you. So I wondered, could you give a brief introduction to the listeners about who you are, what it is that you do? If we start with, I don't know, Beryl, do you want to go first?
Okay, hi everyone. I am Beryl Makori, as introduced earlier. I am a research scientist, a conservationist, and a wildlife person in general, mostly a mammologist. I work in Kenya, based in Kenya. I'm a Kenyan, and most of my work is finding out and looking at less known species. That's what I've done all my active years in conservation, and now also linking habitats to this wildlife, because everyone else is always concerned about the animal itself and they forget they need a place to live, or somewhere to find food. So now I'm also focusing also on their habitats and communities that live with pangolins or other wildlife species, because that's what they always see every day. And then as researchers or scientists, we come in and look at the species and forget there's people who all their lives have known this species. So that's basically what I do. So at the moment, I'm working with the Pangolin Project, which is a non-profit organization based here in Kenya. And our main focus is just looking at pangolins. It's the only species. And most specifically now, we have focused on the giant pangolins, which are found in one small area in the whole of the country, nowhere else. So that's our focus for now, and that's what I'm working on now. There's a little more background of, as Jack mentioned, I did some bit of, a lot of bat work across the world and across East Africa. So yeah, so that's my line of work, and that's who I am and what I do.
Mm-hmm. It's brilliant, and it's something that, like, yes, I think you're exactly the right guest for this show, because I think that you, by opening with like I like the underappreciated things that like people don't do. I'm like, yep, that is exactly why we're here. That's
Yeah.
perfect. And then also to mention pangolins, it's just perfect. It's
Yes.
brilliant. And then I guess we'll dive into your work a bit more in a second. But then, of course, Karen, you do kind of something very different to that, but still equally interesting in a very different kind of way. So do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Well, hi, everyone. I'm actually predominantly known as a wildlife artist. I feel a complete imposter here because I know very little about pangolins. That's why I'm really fascinated to hear what Beryl has to say. In fact, I was born in Uganda, but we were brought up in East Africa, and we lived in the bush. As far as I'm aware, the only time I have seen a pangolin, it would have been a giant pangolin, was in Tanzania, and we were driving along a track in the dark, and my dad said, "Oh, look, it's a scaly anteater." So that's how I first knew about them, and now I realise that they're one and the same. And now, of course, obviously recently, now knowing that they're the most trafficked animal in the world, I've been quite interested. But I have never seen one since then. I'm hoping to get to your project, Beryl, at some stage, probably next year, visit you, and then I can take my own pictures and do some paintings, or a painting of one, and that's what's quite exciting for me. But yeah, that's in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I guess, do you want to tell? So, I mean, I feel like not underselling yourself, but just say, I'm in a nutshell and a wildlife artist. I'm very acclaimed, very excellent wildlife artist. Just to big you up a little bit more to the listeners, because I feel like very humble response, but also I feel like people need to know excellent wildlife artist, fantastic work. And like, yes, when I was doing my kind of research, I was kind of like, I always like to go in and to see people's websites and just kind of make sure I'm asking the right questions and doing the right thing. And yeah, fantastic work that I feel like, while we're chatting, if people want to go and look at things to kind of, if they're listening to a podcast to relax or whatever, go and have a Google and have a look at some of Karen's artwork, because it's fantastic. It's really fantastic.
That's very kind. Thank you.
No, it's completely justified. So no, it's okay. But no, that's that. Yes, so really interesting kind of work. Very different work, I guess. And I suppose before we get into kind of where you are now and working with kind of David Shepherd on the David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation on things and kind of this sort of stuff, I was wondering. I think everybody has very different routes into conservation. And I guess like both of you are doing conservation work and raising awareness about things and doing research, but you're doing it in very, very different ways. And so I wanted to know is how did you get into it? And how did you know that like, oh, I want to do field research or oh, I wanted to do art to raise awareness of things like because it's really interesting to me having people who do conservation in very, very different ways. Because I think some people picture conservation as very like, this is the career, you do this one type of thing, but it's obviously not just that. So yeah, I guess if we're taking it in turns, we'll go back to Beryl. Where did it come from for you? What was it that made you want to go, I want to do conservation and specifically this type of conservation work?
Thank you. So for me, my reasons or how I got into conservation is very here and there. So we grew up in Narok County. People who know Kenya will know that, and is mostly Maasai
Mm-hmm.
community, and they are the one community that has lived with wildlife side by side for the longest.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where my dad used to work. So he would like to go with us on walks. There weren't a lot of means of transport here and there, so it was a bit of walking, and we would see all this type of wildlife. And I had questions about everything. Why does the zebra has this kind of stripe? Why does the giraffe's neck is too long? Why, all these questions. And most of them, because he wasn't a conservationist or anything or an educator, he didn't know the answers. So he's like, I really not sure, but I think it was just made like that. So then all these questions I really wanted to find out. At a young age, they looked like silly questions, but I wanted really, really to find out.
Mm-hmm.
So as I grew all my through my education system, I always followed the path of that will lead me to conservation because I just wanted to find out. I wanted to find out. I wanted to find out, and then I actually chose to do this in school. In university, I chose to do this,
Mm-hmm.
and I just went straight into it. And then while in college, that's where you start to really really define the path, because conservation is very wide. That's
Yeah.
where you find the path that you really want to follow. But then I found that when you wanted to look for anything about elephants, thousands of papers,
Mm-hmm.
lions, thousands of, all these things. And then when you're just looking at mammals, then I was like, bats, then there's few. And then we still finding out, or we still don't know. So then
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I want to do this. And then coincidentally, I met someone who was solely working on bats while I
Mm-hmm.
was in my undergrad. And then I really pushed him. He almost just, disappeared from me because I was always on his neck with questions, and I want to come with you to the field. Can I just come? You don't need to pay me. I just need to observe. And he was so tired of me. He was so tired. But then that's how I carved that path. And I worked on bats from 2012 to 2020. And I did a lot on bats until I came up to pangolins, which we are going to discuss in a few. But that's how I got into it. It was just from a small little age, just wanting to know, why does this look like this? Why does this not look like the other one? Just that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know, I think that's brilliant, and I think that's a way that it starts for a lot of people. It's just that curiosity of like, why is this bird in around our house, or why is
Yeah.
this little insect crawling around, or why is
Yeah.
this thing, or why this, why that, why that. And when your parents aren't wildlife people and they don't necessarily know the answers,
Yeah.
and they try their best and they nod and they go, oh well, maybe this or like that and this, that, and the next thing.
Yeah.
No, but it's yeah, I think it makes perfect sense. And I guess a little follow up, because I think the main discussion is we're gonna kind of keep moving forward, I guess, and talk about pangolins. But I have to stop on bats for a second,
Yes.
because I think we've not had a full bat episode before, but we should have one at some point because they are fascinating, and I
Yes.
think they are. I guess they're similar to pangolins in that they have this, not like a PR issue, but people just
Yeah.
don't know what they are necessarily, or they are kind of have a perception of them that isn't necessarily true,
Yeah.
or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so my question has to be like, what was it that made you be like, I really love bats? What was it that drew you to those creatures? Like, what was it? Something about them, or was it a fact that you learned, or what was the thing?
So in my culture, in my community, they are the species that when seen, especially during the day,
Mm-hmm.
someone is going to die.
Mm-hmm.
Something terrible is going to happen.
Wow.
So they like the first thing will people hit them, kill them, whatever. If they see them in your
Mm-hmm.
house, like no one wants to come close to you. So it was that bad. Now I didn't grow up in that culture. I grew up in a town setting, but my parents were very good at telling us these things so that we just get to know them. Now, when I went now to properly study, and when you get into undergrad, now you start, getting
Mm-hmm.
into things, then you find there is no correlation anywhere with a wildlife and anything that happens to anyone. So,
Mm-hmm.
so then I just wanted to in the beginning, I just wanted to tell my parents like what
Mm-hmm.
I think about the birds and how they behave the way they do. Why do they hang upside down? Because that's one of the things that make them terrible in the cultures. So why do they hang upside down? And then why are they flying?
Mm-hmm.
Why do they have fur and they're not birds? Or so I wanted to tell them. But then
Mm-hmm.
they had more questions that I had researched. So I kept on researching and telling them, and then I just got so deep into it, and everything was so um, not very easy to find information, and
Mm-hmm.
everything was like wow for me. Like this is eye opening. This I didn't know this, or
Yeah.
I didn't know there's so many species. We only know the bats. There's 100 species in Kenya
Mm-hmm.
plus. So it just went on like that. And I got
Mm-hmm.
so deep into it that I was like, then this is what I'm going to do. I've invested too much. I enjoy doing it and I want to do it. And coincidentally, I'm a very night person. I
Mm-hmm.
am very, very active at night. It was no problem at all to just be off and do bats the whole night. Yeah.
Uh I mean that's perfect. I think that's
Yes.
yeah. Yeah, that is they've really worked to your schedule, which is nice for they're interesting and they kind of the
Yeah.
nocturnal that
Yeah.
works well. And it's interesting. It's really really interesting. It's something that like I want to look into more because I know I'm doing a PhD currently at the University of Edinburgh and there's people in my office similarly working with like cultural perceptions of wolves and kind of the big bad wolf kind of idea and how
Mhm.
these kind of perceptions of animals damage conservation efforts to kind of protect them. So it's
Yeah.
interesting that you kind of it's something that affects multiple species, whether that be
Yes.
for a huge variety of reasons. It's really really interesting,
Yeah.
really really interesting. So I can see why you would be kind of like, why is this? Why is this?
Yes.
Um, and I guess if we move over now, Karen, I suppose I kind of asked. It's kind of the same question again, but like, what was it for you that drew you into conservation? Because I know you could have created art about so many things. If you're like, you could have. There's so many things, beautiful things in the world to inspire you. What was it that made you think nature conservation? Yeah, what was that kind of journey like for you?
I think so. I think I touched on in my opening introduction
Hmm.
that I was brought up in the bush. Basically, my father was a civil engineer, so we
Yeah.
were living in these site offices with surrounded by fences to keep the wildlife out and to keep us safe.
Hmm.
So, and because we led such a nomadic existence, we were either in Kenya or Uganda or Tanzania, Somalia, at some all over East Africa. So, and we didn't have a lot of belongings because there was just too much to carry around. So my brother and I would draw to entertain ourselves. We didn't have very many
Hmm.
toys. So we used to form a game in art. We had
Hmm.
pencils and we had paper, and that was easy to obtain. So it started there, I think. But I think also growing up in Africa and watching, I mean, those days, everywhere was just teeming with wildlife. And I just cannot believe how many species have disappeared and how human encroachment have really affected the wildlife that I've grown up with and got to know.
Hmm.
So the main thing that happened was winning Wildlife Artist of the Year in 2012. I entered it because I loved painting wildlife, but I hadn't really
Hmm.
thought about how my art could help conservation. And
Hmm.
that really brought it home to me. And I always entered it, or most years I've entered it since then. And I think art for conservation is a great thing. And with so many species dying off, I think the wildlife art as an art form is becoming more and more and more important, because we're actually recording species that might not be there tomorrow. I probably digressed from the question, but I hope that meant something.
No, I don't think you've digressed at all. It's perfect because it tells us exactly why you would do it and why it matters. Because it's interesting to see, like, and it is it's beautiful for us to look at now, but it's important to document the things that are here now in different ways and in different perceptions, different kind of interpretations and different kind of settings. And to see, because pictures tell one story, books tell one story, research tells one story, but the way that people see things and create art about things is often not entirely based on something completely real, but it's how they see it and what it means to them, I guess. So that's kind of, it's also an important narrative to carry forward. And my
And
lacking knowledge of art, I don't know.
a beautiful painting can actually
Mhm.
reach somebody that has never had any consideration for wildlife or
Yeah.
these wild species. So they'll come across it on Instagram or Facebook, and they've never been interested before, and suddenly they get drawn in. And so I think art is quite an important tool nowadays.
Hmm.
So,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. Yeah. I guess then something that I was going to ask was because I guess because your story kind of, you were like, it was about this competition. Was it something that you entered just not thinking about, or was it something you kind of were, somebody around you went, "Oh, you should do this"? Like, how did, because it's changed the trajectory of your life? Uh
It
huh.
was my cousin. I never really sold art in the United Kingdom. I mainly just
Hmm.
like painted for friends or did something here. But my cousin said, "You're a great wildlife artist. You should enter this competition." And I didn't even know.
Hmm.
I knew exactly who David Shepherd was because he was always a bit of a mentor to me.
Yeah.
But I didn't know at that point that there was a competition. I think it had only been going for
Hmm.
3 or 4 years at that point. And now I realize how important it is. But yes, it was inspired by my cousin, who's also an artist, but not a wildlife artist. And she
Hmm.
said, "You've got to enter this." And I went there with no expectations whatsoever. I was completely chilled and relaxed. And I wasn't even really concentrating when they read out the winner until she whooped. And it's like, no, can't be me. But yeah, it was an amazing day, and it literally changed the course of not my life, but what I did with my art. I
Hmm.
wanted to make it mean something and achieve something good in this
Hmm.
dwindling world of wildlife.
Hmm. And I mean, I now am going. There's so many follow up questions. We're going to move on to my next like question that but I have to ask, like, do you think, like, since that, like, if you look at a painting that you've done or a piece of art that you've done before and to now, can you see, like, in yourself, like, and do people comment like, this feels like it has a different, like, thought process behind it? Does that feel, is it something that you're like aware of looking back on the things that you've done?
I'm aware of it. I don't know if
Mhm.
anyone else is, but I can certainly see much more passion in my work. And like
Uh-huh.
if I'm gonna paint an endangered species, it really, really means something.
Mhm.
So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, maybe someone will say write a comment on the thing. But as far as I know my art has changed since winning
Mhm.
that competition in
Mhm. That,
2012, a lifetime ago.
yes.
I
Oh,
know I won
that's
it
it.
again this year, but
I was going to say, just to bring it back to the point, I was going to say, because yes, we kind of, the whole episode is framed around this, the David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation. And because they kind of set up the interview, they brought us all together to have this chat. And obviously, you both interact with them in slightly different ways. So I guess it's worth mentioning briefly why that is. I guess, like, Beryl, what's your kind of association with them? And then we'll talk a bit more about Karen's it's too. We're recording this on a Monday morning, guys. What is your association? There's a too many syllables for this time of day. To what is your association with them?
So the Pangolin Project and David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation Fund, it
Hmm.
is. We've worked together for quite some time. I think this is our third
Hmm.
year, and they support our work. They are one of our donors.
Hmm.
and they've really, really heavily supported what we do. As from the team to everything that we've done, they've really, really come in handy for the time that we've been working with them. We couldn't have achieved any of this without them. It's for pangolins already hard, so no one wants to be associated with something that isn't bringing money in terms of tourism, or no one knows about it. How do I know if it's going to last? Is it the last two pangolins you're talking about? So DSWF really, really came through, and they believed in us as the Pangolin Project to do this in Kenya, and they just came forward and they just supported us all through. So that's how we relate with them.
Perfect. And Karen, what is your I know you've kind of been involved in the competitions, and I know that this year you donated your kind of winnings from the competition to the organization, which is incredibly generous and wonderful. But so is that kind of what's your kind of main is that your kind of main association? What's the kind of relationship you have with them?
About 3 years ago, Claire Brench actually reached out to me, and she said to me, because I've known Claire and her husband for many, many years, and she said, how can we collaborate? What can we do? And then it was, COVID, and I moved from the city, Nairobi, and I'm now at the coast. And it just nothing ever really happened. So when I won this year's Way competition, I wasn't aware until I was going through which projects the David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation support. I had to choose which one should I support, and it was the only one from Kenya. And then it was serendipity because Claire had asked me, and I thought, well, this is a no-brainer. So I'm going to give my half of the winnings to the Pangolin Project, and so that's how that came about. So yeah, I'm really, really pleased to have done that, because I think the pangolins are quite sort of, I mean, I know we all know it's the most highly trafficked animal, but I don't think many people get really excited about them, and I don't know why, because they're quite adorable. So, so sweet.
Yeah. It's something, and that leads us really nicely into the discussion about the Pangolin Project and everything, because I think it's something that I don't know if in talking to people, and when I was producing this podcast originally, and when kind of I don't know, when I was kind of chatting to people at conferences, even still, people sometimes look at you like, I think I know what you're talking about, but I'm not sure if I know what you're talking about. So you need to have a picture or something ready to go to be like, this is what it is. And I never understand that, because they are so charismatic, charming little things. Like, they're just brilliant. And so I guess we will refer to the expert in the room. Unfortunately for you, Beryl, we're going to come back to you. No pressure. But yes, I wanted to know. So if we start with a fairly simple question, I guess, well, maybe not, maybe a very complicated answer, deep answer, but why pangolins for you? What is it that makes you want to work with them? What is it about their story that kind of, captures you?
So, as I said in my introduction, that I had worked with bats for a very long time, for many years. Actually, I've been known as the Batwoman of East Africa, because everyone else would come to us for bats because there was no one else. But then while you're doing this, because they're also nocturnal animals, you're out at night, and then one time we find a pangolin. And that was my first time seeing a pangolin before. So we were just, this is so nice, this is so cool. And then, of course, something like that, you go back and you want to find out things about it, like what species could this be, or things like that. And there was so limited information that I could find. And then in my spare time or whatever, I would just dig out information about the pangolins while I was still doing bats. And then when COVID hit, everyone was saying all these things about pangolins, and COVID. And I'm like, I don't think this is true, because as much as there's no information a lot, but I don't think this. So I just got into it. And while doing that, while looking for information, I found the Pangolin Project. And then I was like, okay, bats can wait. I've already done so many years for bats. Let me do something small for pangolins, and then I'll come back to bats. That was the idea in the beginning. And then when I got into the Pangolin Project, our director, Dr. Clay, is amazing. And everyone, was lacking the information. So we got deeper into it and deeper into it in community, and then there was no looking back. And then I'm like, I like this so much, like I really, really want to do more on the pangolin. So it was just a case of the same thing with just wanting to find out information. Then there isn't information. Then I'm like, okay, if I do it, I might find out more. And then it just ended up being too good, and I just stayed on it. And now I think this is the species that, is the climax of my career, if I can say.
So, do you think you've transitioned now from the bat woman to the pangolin woman, or are we not quite there yet?
Pretty much. Is now everything is on pangolins that I do. There is so much to be done, so much that I feel people are not aware of how much there is that they can also come and join and do. And it's just a species that people just don't care about much, if I can say. It's just, yeah.
I guess that actually opens up a question that I think is quite an interesting one, because I think on the show we've had people who've worked on bushmeat, we've had people who've worked on kind of trafficking, we've had people who've worked on kind of habitat encroachment and fragmentation, all of these things, kind of talking about the various kind of issues that pangolins face. And so I guess the question I would have for you is just the way that you've answered the previous questions. Do you think it's the main? Is your main concern the lack of awareness of pangolins more than anything else, or what do you think the main kind of issue is that they face?
So, without getting so much into details, is wildlife species like pangolins, because people do not have any information in it, it leads to all the other threats they face.
Yeah.
So, for example, people don't know anything about pangolins. They don't know whether it has value anywhere. If a poacher comes and asks a community person, do you know this animal, with a photo? Yeah, sure, I can show you one this evening. I know a barrow, because they didn't have the information. Or if another threat is habitat loss, if I don't know anything about this pangolin, I don't care whether I cut all the trees and burn all the barrows, because I don't know. I don't know whether they need the barrows. I don't know whether they need the trees or anything else. So, in my opinion, lack of information and awareness just leads to all these other threats that wildlife face. And so much for pangolins is because for the longest time, no one mentioned them, no one cared, no one knew, no one even, talked about them at all. So, especially now, it's like we are starting on a fresh ground. The community have lived with this pangolin for all the years, but then they don't know much. They just know this animal is called this in our language, and that's all they know. So for me, lack of awareness is the root of all these other threats that pangolins face.
Yes. No, that makes perfect sense, actually. And it's and I guess then, how do you begin to when it's an awareness issue, and then it kind of stems from there into other things? What is it the Pangolin Project does to kind of start to deal with these things? Do you kind of deal with that first, the awareness, and then this kind of other things you kind of hope will be minimized because of the awareness? Or what is the kind of, how do you work?
So for the Pangolin Project, beginning of 2022, that's when we realized there is giant pangolins. Not really, there is giant pangolins in Kenya. Everyone knew they were extinct in the country, and we were focusing on the other species. So when we found where they were, coming into the area as a new project, no one knows you, no one knows what you're up to. So our first step is always to make people understand who the Pangolin Project is and what we do and what our interest is. So we start working with the local conservation organizations if they are there. But then our first priority is always the community and this awareness, because this is not like a protected area setting where you only need permissions from the park management and then off you go. This is in community area, not protected, not fenced like to protect it, nothing. So it means you're working on people's land, their personal land, so you'll need their permissions. But then for this to happen, they need to understand, what are you doing? Or what is this pangolin you're talking about? And why are you interested? I've been seeing it in my land all the time. Why are you now telling us it's important and there is all this noise about it? So awareness is always the first step that we do. And very, very much support from DSWF. They supported us in getting community guardians, These are people from the community working with us back to their community. So they get trained, then they go back to their community to now tell them this is a pangolin, it doesn't hurt, it doesn't have any negative impacts on your livelihood, doesn't eat anything else. And if you see it, please don't kill it, but rather call me and then we can come and deal with it like this. So then they even trust them more because there's like, oh, this is so and so's son, or this is someone I know, so they can't be lying to me. So that is the first step that we did. And we are very grateful for DSWF because that would not have happened if it were me going to tell them how a pangolin is important for them.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
really, really interesting. Really, really interesting. And I think what's actually is interesting and kind of can transition, I guess, Karen, a little bit back into the conversation is obviously you're working with local communities and kind of spreading like the message with people who see the animal every day. Whereas Karen, I guess your work focuses a lot on people who may never see this animal in real life. They might see your painting before any sort of real experience. And I wondered kind of, is that something you are kind of conscious of and you're kind of thinking about when you're producing something of like this might be someone's first introduction to this thing?
No, I'm not thinking about when I'm doing the painting. I'm trying to get it right. I'm
Yeah.
feeling the painting. I'm not really considering whether it will sell, who will see it
Yeah.
at that point at all. If I
Yeah.
once I send it over to the galleries, then of course I'm really hoping that someone will come and buy it. But I said the galleries, but I do quite a lot of donation of my art to various projects where they have an auction and they raise funds, and that I work a lot with rhinos, and of course the David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation. I've always tried to support them. I think they're a great group, and lots of people contact me, but I'm about donating my art to help conservation. But certainly, going back to your question, I'm not really thinking about anything but getting it right
Yeah.
while I'm doing it. Yeah.
No, no, that makes sense because yeah, I guess yeah, it's the different ways of working, and sometimes these things are comparable, sometimes they're not. And I was like, we'll just see what's if there's something there. But no, it makes perfect sense. It's yeah, it's really really interesting actually, really really interesting. And I guess while we're chatting to you, Karen, since you're now back in the conversation, I'm sorry, I've turned the questions back to you again. I was going to ask. So you talked a little bit about why you kind of picked the pangolin project, but I guess it would be interesting to hear from somebody whose expertise isn't pangolins. What is it about their story that speaks to you? What is it about that kind of makes you be like, oh, this is an animal that I really, really am invested in supporting, given you donated your like, what was it that, yeah, really spoke to you about
I
them?
think it's the poaching and the trafficking that really gets under my skin. I just find and as Beryl, I think you touched on it earlier. I mean, it's just so pointless. You know, okay, you can eat an animal, I suppose, but you don't have to eat a pangolin. You can eat anything else. And the whole idea that they are going to cure COVID or cancer, or they have some kind of medicinal properties, I just find it extraordinary in this technology advanced world, that people still have those beliefs, and I just think it's such an endearing, precious creature. We all need to try and do what we can to help. So, and I can only do it through my art. Beryl is boots on the ground, hands on. You can tickle its back. I can't, but I'm going to. Next year, I'm going to come and tickle a pangolin back.
You're welcome.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Oh
Yeah.
no, that's fantastic, and yeah, it's yeah, they are incredibly charismatic, and I can see why, and I think that's the importance of getting their story out to so many people. And I guess then the next natural question is, I guess we'll stick with you for a second, Karen. Is that your next? If you were once you visited, is that what you would like to do next? Is produce a piece of art or pieces of art inspired by the pangolin? Is that kind of your next goal? What's next for you?
Well, I'm actually doing a sort of side exhibition at the next Wildlife Artist of the Year anyway. But I would very much like to get into the Mara, and I prefer to work from my own photos and my own
Yeah.
experiences. I would feel a bit disingenuous if I just went on the internet or said, "Can you send me a picture of a pangolin?" I know the light I like. I know what's going to work as a. If I take photographs, I know what's going to work as a painting. So yes, I definitely will be painting pangolins, and I definitely will be donating any funds I can raise from that painting. But yeah, probably next year. So
That's
that is the plan.
fantastic. Oh,
Yeah.
and next year is shockingly close now. I don't know where this year's
Oh,
gone, but next year is
Yes.
scarily close. So, yep, it's not that long.
Yeah.
I tell you.
And,
Yeah.
and Beryl, what about you? What do you see the Pangolin Project and yourself doing next?
So, just as I mentioned, that at the moment, our main focus is the giant pangolin because, for one, they're just in this small area in the country, nowhere else. Secondly, their population doesn't seem too good. We don't have the actual estimates, but given with what we've done for the past 1.5 years and what we're seeing, they may be between 30 to 80 only left.
Wow.
They've been forgotten for so long. Even getting the right tagging equipment for them is difficult because no one has been interested. So for us at the moment, as much as we'd like to produce these very nicely written papers about how a male pangolin looks for a female and whatever, at the moment, our main concern is protecting these animals before anything else. We can come do the research later, find out all this, information about them, how long do they, the gestation period and whatever. But we are not going to be able to do that if we don't protect them now. So that's our main focus at the moment. And protecting them has turned out to be not only following that pangolin, because we've realized I can tag the pangolin, follow it, it goes into a charcoal kiln that is right burning at the time. And then when it turns left, there is nothing, everything has been cut down. Then it turns right, there is an electric fence that it gets caught on and dies. So nothing else matters now apart from protecting the pangolins and then their habitats. So the Pangolin Project at the moment is focused on those two things. So protecting the habitat, which is the forest, removing electric fences or actually having the bottom strands de-electrified so that the pangolins don't die on them, and actually now tagging and protecting, following, because we can't protect them if we don't know where they are. So those are the three main things we are focusing on, at least for the next 3 to 5 years. Unless something magically happens and in 1 year or 2 years things have settled and that's done. So where I see the Pangolin Project at, or myself, is having a viable pangolin population. We don't know how many is viable, but we're talking about a viable pangolin population, and then having a habitat protected and quote in quotes pangolin sanctuary. Because everywhere else, because it's public land, has gone, we are looking at having some land that is left and conserved for all other wildlife, but majorly for pangolins. That will be my happiest day alive, because at the moment, I'm always sad when a pangolin dies and you tag it today and 2 days later it's died on an electric fence.
Oh,
Or
must
just
be heartbreaking.
you can't find it. You don't want to imagine. So that would be, where I want to see the Pangolin Project and myself at. Viable population and protected habitat for the pangolins. Yes.
Yeah. And I think they're very reasonable, very reasonable requests and goals. And I think hopefully you will be able to get there and kind of, protect and find, because I don't think we took a long enough second to just stop and appreciate the fact that you found there was a type of pangolin in the country that people had just
Yes.
assumed, oh, it's not here anymore. And
It's nothing.
it's already at least hopeful, and it's not the huge
Yeah.
success that it will hopefully be in maybe a few years' time when you have the sanctuary hopefully set out with these things. But that is already a huge success and hopeful message for people, is that even when wildlife we think it's gone. I know recently there was that video of an echidna that everyone thought was extinct for years that popped up.
Yeah.
It just wandered right across a camera trap, and it was there it was. And so it's this kind of nice hopeful thing that even when there are really sad elements to these stories, there are still elements of hope out there, which is quite a nice thing to know. That's hopefully we'll keep everybody motivated and going, and really interesting.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
Yes.
And I guess that kind of brings us to the last couple questions that I have. I ask these questions to everybody, and I think it's always interesting to hear the various responses that I get to similar questions. Um, and the first of those is, how can people get more involved in conservation? And I know you said, Beryl, that there was a lot of ways that people can get involved in the work that you do. How can people get involved in your work?
So for pangolin conservation, I believe there is a lot more that can be done. There is so much more. So first, people can get involved by just, finding out projects that interest them, of species that they're interested in, and just, support them in whatever way possible for you, whether it's through donation or just talking about it on your
Yeah.
platforms, or, just raising awareness on it in your circle. It makes a lot of difference. I've heard of people who have had someone telling a story about how they visited the Pangolin Project. They're like, really? There's pangolins in Kenya? It's just most people are just not aware. So talking about it is also raising the profile of that species and organizations that are working on it. Also is just talking to everyone else. It's not just about conservationists. For conservation, especially for pangolin, we want tech people, the engineers or people who can make a tag. So I cannot make a tag. I can follow a pangolin and whether I cannot make a tag. I may have in my head what I want it to look like, but someone who does it may say that's not viable, that's not possible. So, people like that, if you're interested, just, visit the project, speak to us, just look at what you can do about it, so that it helps. Because if we have things like that, it makes our work easier. I may have tech equipment that I may never ever think of producing, but it is making my conservation or protection of the pangolins easier. So it's everyone, not just people in conservation. Everyone, just find out more about the species if you're interested, the projects working on it. Visit us, please. We are based in the Mara, in Narok, in Kenya. When you come around, find us and just come say hi, see what we're doing, talk to the team, all that is very positive input into protection of the species. And if you're an organization or a donor, think of donating to projects. It's what keeps us going, knowing that someone else is also invested and interested, and it's not just you running around, with the pangolins.
Yes. And I think I'm going to use that as an excuse at some point to come and visit you, because I think my one of my first introductions to wildlife and me realizing like I love wildlife was actually my parents have this big like folder of pictures from when they got married. They went on their honeymoon to Kenya. And so all of these amazing photos, the wildlife that like some of the most incredible things I've ever seen, and photos now where I'm like, I didn't know my parents were that brave or cool to be stood on near these things or doing these things. Like, so I have always wanted to go and see it all for myself. And so now this is even more of an excuse to be like, oh, I'll definitely turn up eventually now.
Yes.
And I guess, Karen, it's going back to you. Did you have anything to add to what Beryl had said? I guess you're one of these people who doesn't do a classic scientific conservation method. You do something that's out there, but still raises awareness and does amazing things. Do you have anything to add to getting more people involved?
Beryl has touched on some things that I would also agree with. I think we should encourage our kids into nature more, because let's just leave the smartphones away and they have to leave them at home and get them into nature and get them excited about what this planet has to offer. That would be the first. I think in every school should do a school trip to the Pangolin Project and others. that would be really good. If you're an adult, come on safari, because you think, oh, I'll go on safari and I'd like to see an elephant, but the guides that take people on safari are so knowledgeable and well educated, and you find out things you never dreamt that you'd find out. I mean, I've done so many safaris, and yet every single time I go on, it was like, really? I never knew that, because they're so knowledgeable. So yeah, do a safari, and as you say, let's donate. If you feel passionate about it, donate some money to. There's so many really worthwhile projects out there. Volunteer. I mean, a lot of it. There are groups that want volunteers. Sometimes you have to pay to volunteer, but if you feel that is still helping conservation. So that's another way of doing it. And do enter wildlife art competitions. There's quite a few out there now. And, often the entry fee is really small, but I just think it raises awareness amongst your peers, whether you're a child, whether you're a young adult, or whether you're an old bat like me. There's lots out there that you can do through art. There's definitely lot to do. Yeah, that's I think that's about covered that I can think of.
Yeah, I think it's a lot to think about and take away. And yes, and I should mention, and I'll mention it again at the end, and all of these things, that this episode was organised by the David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation, and this episode is actually coming out the week that they are doing a Big Give campaign, where if you go onto the Big Give kind of website and donate, which I'll put a link to that in the description, to the David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation, all of your donations will be doubled. And the campaign that they're running is Against All Odds, the Scale of Extinction, and it's all about pangolin conservation. So if you're sitting there this week listening to this, the week this comes out, thinking, oh, maybe I should do one of these things, you can go and donate right now, and whatever you donate will be matched. So if you can only feel like, oh, I only have a little bit to donate, don't worry, someone else will double it for you. So, or if you're feeling really generous, give lots of money and it will be donated, doubled. So whatever you have, I think would be, if you're feeling inspired, this is the week to do it. And yes, I'll put a link to that in the description. And yes, the last couple questions. The first one is, aside from the pangolin and the bat, we've talked about pangolins and bats already, but what is your favorite underappreciated species and why? And I will ask Beryl first.
Okay. So my favorite species, just to look at, and I can sit there for hours just watching, are the giraffes. But my favorite species now is aardvarks.
Good choice.
Aardvarks. No one talks about aardvarks. These things are amazing. They're so cool. We see them on the camera traps or when we are out at night, and they are so nice animals. And then one thing that I've realized is we call them the contractors. They are the burrow contractors. They dig burrows in seconds. Like a few minutes, there's a huge burrow, and then 2 days later, you come set up a camera trap. There is porcupine, there is snake, there is, mongooses and everything else, now using the burrow. And then once all the other animals abandon that burrow, and then we're like, should we take away this camera trap? And then one night, the aardvark comes and digs it up again. And then all these species come back. So they're amazing animals that, support all this burrow biodiversity. And no one really thinks about them. The hyena, people follow the hyena. They're not thinking that, okay, the aardvark made the burrows for the hyenas. And the pangolin, people like us, we are like, great pangolins. And then without the aardvarks, they wouldn't have proper burrows to use, That's why they are now my favorite.
That's a pretty good reason. And I think, something that is, they're another, I think my thing for animals is if they have long, funny kind of noses, there's something about them that I love, because it's tapirs are one of my favorites. Aardvarks, pangolins, like all of these things with long, funny noses that do important ecosystem roles, I think they're the species that I fall for. So 100% behind that one. And Karen, what about you?
Well, when you wrote the question, two things immediately came to mind. One, they're not underappreciated, but they were by me, was whales. Recently here in Watamu, they've been breeding and calving here. And I went out to the high seas, struggling to keep my balance and take photos. But when you're right beside a whale and it breaches, it is the most exciting thing.
Yeah.
So I'm really into whales at the moment, and I definitely fancy doing some paintings of whales. But a creature that's always been really, really endearing to me is a chameleon. I love chameleons, mainly because they're such fun to paint. But in my Nairobi house, they were at certain times of the year, they were just all over the place, and they were just really exciting to watch maneuver and battle for territory. And so, chameleons is another one that, because they're such funky colors, or they change colors all the time. So, that's fine.
No, I think they're both good. I think excellent. I think whales, yeah, they're one of the few times where like the few animals that make you go, I feel really small when you see like you're like I feel really really like because I think we live like especially in places like Scotland, the biggest animal you're going to see is a deer, which is quite large. The biggest carnivore I think we have is a badger. So that's not they're not big things. So when you see something like a whale, you realize quite how little we are and quite how
Yeah.
yeah. So I yes, big fan. And then yes, um the chameleon always gonna be great. And I always appreciate when someone mentions something that's not to put a downside on the aardvarks, but I always love when people don't mention mammals because I think I struggle sometimes because my go-to answers are always mammals, and I'm like I need to try and think of things that aren't mammals. So really interesting
And
to
not
go. Yeah, excellent choice.
yeah.
Um,
Yes.
and yes, my final question then is if anybody wants to keep up to date with anything you're doing, follow your work, support your work, where can they go to do that? And I guess if we go back to Beryl, where can people keep up to date with the Pangolin Project?
So to find the Pangolin Project and just keep up with what we do, we have a
Mhm.
website at thepangolinproject.org, and then we also have an Instagram page, the Pangolin Project, and every other platform. I'm not promising a lot of updates. Scientists have been known to be the worst with social medias, but we try. We try, and we are working towards it. So we are going to do better, especially in the coming year. So that's where you can find us. And also you can just find us physically at our camp. We are based in the Mara West camp of the
Mhm.
Mara, just outside the Mara Triangle Park. So if you're around there, you come all that sides, there's camps around there, just ask that any of the guides will know us. We've done a lot of work with them just so that if guests ask about us, they know how to reach us. They have my contacts and our contacts. So if you come around Mara, especially the Mara West side, just ask your guide if they know the Pangolin Project and if they can drop you by and just come say hi and have a chat with us.
Perfect. And Karen, what about you?
I also have a website, KarenLaurenceRowe.com, and I generally you can subscribe to that. And usually I put out a newsletter if I'm going to have an exhibition or I'm doing something for conservation. I nearly always try and do a little video about the inspiration of it and then the making of the painting. So that's always quite a good one to subscribe to. I also have a Facebook and an Instagram page. So yeah, follow me there and keep up to speed with what I'm up to. So that's
Perfect.
it.
Perfect. No, that's brilliant. And I'll put links to all of those things in the description of this episode when it goes up. So people can listen and they can then click and go and find everything. So everyone who's listening, everything will be down there. Go and click, go and have a look, go and see, support everyone's work. And as I say, against all odds, the scale of extinction, that will also be, there'll be a link down there to donate to the Big Give campaign that's going on for the David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation. So if you want to do that as well, then that will be there to kind of support their work, which is incredible. And yes, has allowed the three of us to come together in what I've just realised at the end, matching outfits. We've all gone for green this morning. I think that's a conservationist colour. The listeners will
Yes.
the listeners won't get to appreciate that, but we are all looking exactly the same today.
Yes.
Um, and so yes, thank you so much. To well, the last things that I have to say, of course, are thank you to, of course, the listeners for paying attention to for engaging, for kind of supporting the show. They can subscribe if you're out there. Subscribe to the show. Leave us a nice review if you've enjoyed the episode. But of course, another huge thank you has to go to you two for your time and your insights and everything you've said. It's been brilliant, a really interesting chat. And yeah, so amazing to see how, these two worlds doing very different things, but all revolving around this one little amazing creature that we all kind of have a shared love for is just wonderful. So thank you so much for your time and everything you've said today. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for making this happen, and thank you for DSWF for also bringing this together and for supporting the Pangolin Project. It goes a very, very long way for just one person to say, I want to support this and I want to do something for pangolins. So thank you so much.
No, thank you, thank you, thank you. It's been fantastic. I've had such a good morning having a chat, and yes, yes, hopefully I know everybody will have had an excellent time listening as well. So, yes, thank you so much. And yes, I guess until next time, thank you everyone again for listening. And goodbye.
Bye.
Okay, goodbye.